Spoiler alert, if you have not seen Love is Blind season 8 up into episode 9, please take a moment to go watch it and then come back. But today I really want to unpack the relationship dynamic between David and Lauren, as their relationship to me seems a little strained, and I don't know if y'all saw it as well. If you don't know who I am Sia, the Transparent Therapist. I help coach women through their trauma so that they can have longer lasting relationships with themselves, others, and Christ. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I do psychotherapy. So if you are ready for me to dive into what I saw, stay tuned. So if David and Lauren were in my office, I would definitely think there's something up here. Throughout the beginning, we saw David, his banter, his humor. It was a little different from what others were used to. He even says it and he recognizes it, but he would poke jabs at Lauren. And for some people, that funny criticism or that funny humor can be great. For others, it's really off-putting. Lauren liked it. We also saw that he had a connection with Molly in the pods. Ultimately, he chose Lauren, and we saw him get so torn up about it. However, we're not watching them in real life environments. And the issue here is that David believes that Lauren was not being honest about her hookup. Lauren is very honest, at least from what we see, and she says that, hey, I hooked up with a guy where I had she had a situation where it was friends with benefits right before the show, maybe a week or two before the show, but David's friends are telling him, no, she was with that guy up until a couple hours, 48 hours before the show. The issue here is that David keeps bringing the whole situation up with Lauren. Mind you, this is a couple, they've been proposed to, they're engaged, and David for some reason feels very distant, right? He is taking the word of his friends, which I do understand because his friends are the ones that are closer to him. He's only known Lauren for a couple weeks at this point. However, he's known her enough to propose. The pods are set up so, I guess in a good way, so that they're isolated in the fact that they can only really focus on one another and without seeing each other, right? Without being blinded by the chemistry. The issue is he is now, from my understanding, is demonizing her. And I'm not sure why, right? We go to a scene where David and Lauren and her friends just finished a cycling class, and they're talking about the whole experience of Lauren and this guy that she met on Hinge, I believe, or maybe it was Tinder, and how she is engaged with him. And her friends are trying to reassure David, look, your friend, who, by the way, isn't the friend who Lauren hooked up with. Let's call the friend who Lauren hooked up with Jim. Jim is not friends with David, but David's friend is friends with Jim. And so David's friend is repeating this information back to David, and David is now confronting Lauren, which is okay. However, David is now in this cycle class bringing it up to her friends. Nobody said anything, and he just brings it up, right? And again, I don't know how editing works on Love is Blind, but he just brings it up, and now it turns into Lauren crying again.
My friends have told me is that like they hung out like right away before she left.
And she's crying. And it makes me wonder, is there something deeper here? Not on Lauren's part, but David's part. Because now we're seeing him as a repeat offender with bringing up something that his partner clearly feels uncomfortable with. And my whole thing is, while I was watching these scenes where Lauren is crying, I didn't sense any kind of validation. If your partner is crying and feeling some sort of way, even if it's something that you're talking about, that you've done or they've done, and you're seeing them cry, I didn't even on the couch in their apartment, I didn't see the connection I wanted to see, where just like, it's okay, where he's soothing her, hugging her, handing her tissues. I didn't see any of that. It's not until the very end of the scene in the gym where he touches her leg gently to give some sort of validation. And it's crazy because her friends, Lauren's friends, bring something up, which I think was a really valid point. They say, well, before the show, haven't you been to a bar? And David goes, I have, right? And they're like, well, it's kind of like that. And then later on in scenes, we'll see David say, well, it's totally different. Throughout these scenes, I think if there was some sort of psychological soothing, which is something, it's a term we use in therapy, I would have felt a little bit more confident in them as a couple. However, the psychological soothing did not happen. The gentle hug, the tap on the shoulder to say it's okay, the handing of tissues, the rubbing of the back, we didn't see it happen. And so the emotional distance that is happening is so consistent that it makes me think, is this couple going to last? I also am assessing this couple through a lens called the Four Horsemen, right? And usually the Four Horsemen in relationships are just behaviors that indicate to me as a therapist what might happen that will eventually lead to a breakup. In the Four Horsemen, we have criticism, we have contempt, we have defensiveness, and we have stonewalling. One of the ones that I saw in the relationship between David and Lauren was contempt. And it was just a little bit of contempt, right? Where he's expressing his superiority through sarcasm, right? With her, especially about the involvement with people prior to the show. So when he says, well, no, mine's is different, it's better, right? Me going to a bar and just flirting, so different from you doing the hookup or this friends with benefits situation. And the thing with hookup culture is very detrimental, in my opinion, when it comes to building a long lasting relationship. But for Lauren, it seems like she had this emotional connection or disconnection with someone where it was just strictly physical. And for her, it's just like, well, I'm going on to the show where I'm looking for an emotional connection. So for her, love did not equate to hookups. But for some reason, David, and again, it's him, I'm trying to be very sympathetic and empathetic, but it just troubled me that he was comparing his situation with flirting into the hookups as not as the same thing, because in any of these situations, they're not committed relationships, right? When you're hooking up with someone, you're not being in a committed relationship. When you're flirting with someone, you're not in a committed relationship. I think both of these do have emotional involvement. In order to flirt with someone, you have to have some sort of emotional connection. And I dare you guys to say something different, right? Whether it doesn't have to be a sexual connection, but there is an emotional connection there. When you're hooking up with someone, it doesn't have to be necessarily, I love this person, but I am okay with this person enough to give them some sort of vulnerability, right? A piece of me. And so when he is exhibiting this contempt, it's one of the Four Horsemen that I see. And I'm like, well, this might not work out. And don't get me wrong, it makes a lot of sense to want to understand the situation. I understand why David would want to understand. However, it then leads me to think, is he upset because on their honeymoon, they did not have relations? Whereas now she's having this friends with benefits situation and she's having these relations, and he's probably thinking like, man, how come they get to do this, but this is my fiance, which is what a lot of the cast members in other seasons or even in Married at First Sight says, hey, you're my wife now. We need to consummate this relationship. Why isn't this happening? And I'm wondering if those are some of the thoughts that David is having. Another thing I'm thinking is, okay, Molly, the other connection he had, I was so sure he was going to pick Molly. So I was very actually taken aback that he chose Lauren, as I thought they connected a little bit better, but that's just me. When he gets his phone back, he's probably seen Molly. He's probably thinking like, oh man, I probably should have chose her. Because we know that has happened in so many other seasons. We've seen this happen. And so I'm wondering if that's something that occurred with him in this situation. When there's something distressing happening in a relationship, it's actually very important to have conversations with your partner. And when you're having these conversations, you still need to have some guards and emotional boundaries. I don't think there were any emotional boundaries occurring or taking it into account for when it came to Lauren and how she felt. Because now you are constantly badgering her about the situation. When we then go to the scene in the kitchen, right? I think it's one of the last scenes. He says something like, my guy friend said that you were with him within 48 hours before coming to the show. And she's like, no. When he said that, it sounds like he really wants out of this relationship. And that's just my opinion. I don't think he wants to be in a relationship with Lauren. I do feel that he is probably seeking another connection somewhere else. And it's hard because we're seeing her being so vulnerable and open to say, like, it was a guy that was friends with benefits. It didn't seem like anything was going to come of it. So I just continued that friends with benefits situation. And believe that David is just very insistent on sabotaging this relationship and sabotaging it in the way where he has no accountability. I don't know what's going to come in the season with the rest of the season, but I am not hopeful for this. I'm not hopeful. Honestly, I don't see this relationship flourishing. I'm sorry. I could be wrong. Usually I'm not wrong, but I don't see them making it to the altar and saying I do. And if they do, I also don't see them making it too long. And that's because David is already exhibiting, just in the beginning of the relationship, some contempt, which again, these four horsemen are really strong indicators of how long a relationship is going to last. I don't know if you guys also catched it, but caught it, but in the last scene in the kitchen, Lauren says something like, "You've been gone for a week." And I'm thinking, wait, does she mean emotionally, figuratively? Has he not been staying in the home? Implying that, or is she implying that they're not living together? And it made me think, wow, has he just been away from her? Or is he only coming up while filming? And we've seen that with AD and Clay. Was it 2 seasons ago where Clay would only come when they were filming, but they weren't together, the rest of the couples during the experiment, where they would stay in the apartment together. So I'm wondering if that's the situation here. And he goes on to say, "I don't think we should have this party tonight. I'm just going to go hang out with my friends." And you can tell that she wanted to be validated there. She wanted some support, especially from her fiance, and she did not get that. She was just like, this is where she's pushing him away, right? Instead of pulling towards, she's pushing him away and said, just go. And I think it's because she's so emotionally overwhelmed at this point. This is why, aside from this, I think Friends with Benefits is so dangerous, because now we have this partner who's thinking, does she have this emotional tie with this guy that she's been hooking up with for so long? Granted, I am a firm believer. I'm going to take you for your word. Hey, it's just friends with benefits. Whenever you had this itch, you felt like you needed to scratch it. I think that was her mindset there. I don't condone it, but that was her mindset. That's what she wants to live by. But I also feel like David gives off this emotional distance, and it could just be his personality, right? With Molly, I'm interested to see how that dynamic will play out once they do that whole reunion of the people in the pods, not the reunion show, but the reunion of them having a party and the people in the pods come. I'm wondering how that plays out. But I generally do feel like he's escaping for some reason. He's trying to find an out. And another reason that came up to me is maybe it's his sister. Maybe he's afraid of disappointing his sister, so he's just like, I need to find a way out of this, right? And I know he's bringing it up like his sister and what she'll think. And the thing is, when you're entering into a new union, you also have to have some boundaries with your family members. When you don't, it then becomes very blurry. It's so hard to navigate a relationship when you have your family members in your ear all the time, because now you can't think straight, and you're not even taking into account your partner. You're taking into account your family member, and you're putting them higher up in the hierarchy when your partner should be here. I do believe, just from what I'm hearing, because we haven't seen his sister yet, that there is some enmeshment, some really unhealthy enmeshment with him and his sister. And enmeshment happens when boundaries between two people are not clear and your thoughts start to become very fused. So now the decisions that you make are based on the other person versus on what you want. Is it possible that his sister has talked in his ear and now she is just not approving of anyone? And unfortunately, Lauren falls underneath the umbrella, and this is a way out for David. And he's just like, well, she did this thing, so now I know I can escape this relationship. He is saying verbally, hey, I don't want to give up, but his actions checked out a long time ago. It did, which almost feels like his attention is somewhere else. I'm also wondering if maybe the expectation he had from Lauren is different from what he's getting right now in the relationship, which is not making him happy. But we have to be mindful. These people have just met. I get it. There's still so much that they have to unpack and learn about each other. And if he's not staying there at the home, they're in for a wild ride. So in the end, we finally see something called a repair attempt, right? Which is his effort to de-escalate the situation, right? So repair attempts happen when a partner is just like, hey, let me see if there's something I can do that can repair or mend the problem that we're having. And his attempt is to tell a little cute joke, or sometimes it could be to apologize. And Dave gives this slight apology, but he also couples it with saying he wants to make it work, but take a break. And it's okay to take a break sometimes, but we don't know how long this break is going to be. His break is like, hey, let me go hang out with my friends. But emotionally, I think he's already broken off. So the attempt to repair is fine, but you also have to be very intentional with how you're going to come back together. Obviously, we see previews, and I guess they're at, was it a bowling alley or a party? I don't know. Sometimes this can be good or bad, but this is just what I've seen. in the beginning. I just feel like the emotional distance and the disconnect that happened with them, it was just not the best. Especially just knowing that he came in with reservations, thinking she knows my friends, and or she dated one of these guys, and she's already assuring him I did not date this guy, but he doesn't want to accept it. It's kind of tough. Dave, why the emotional distance? Is this something you really want to repair, or are you just going through the motions and seeing where this lands? I don't know. Let me know y'all thoughts in the comments. This season is something. It's not no season 7 or season 6, but it's something. I think they are giving us this season real life, I guess. And this is just, although it's boring, I guess we are seeing a lot of healthy things happen as well. So I am appreciative of that. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? You guys think this couple's going to last? Do you think that Dave is correct in being so persistent in asking her about this guy? Do you feel like it speaks to his insecurities? I am really excited to see what you guys have to say. All right. Walk good. Keep the vibes high. I'll see you in the next video. So click the next video. Bye.